tell the audience about how you got started in real estate. Darlene, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tanner.
I want to start out, you guys kind of exploded in 2016 from doing like one townhome project to now you have, I don't even know how many projects you have going. You're the CEO of, I don't even know how many different companies inside CW Group. So let's start with 2016, CW Urban kind of opens its doors. Let's start there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's been a fun ride, so I just got to go back in my memory bank. I think, we're a real estate development company. And so when you say you open your doors, I mean, what does that really mean? It means that you start showcasing your projects that you've acquired. And so, the CW Group is owned by Colin Wright, and he had started acquiring some infill projects downtown. And really when we went on the map is when we went to sell for those. And what had happened is we had collected enough just really bite-sized projects that when it came out, it just felt like a lot because there was like a 12-unit project or a 14 or a 3-unit. And so there was just like, 6 to 10 of them, but they were all just bite-sized deals. But I will tell you this, my background outside of sales was marketing. And one of the things I feel really strong about is just like telling your story. And so I think the reason why we exploded is because we did it in a cohesive way. And so a lot of times real estate developers, you wouldn't even know what their projects are because they have no commonality, right? Yeah. They don't have a common architecture theme. They don't have a common naming theme. You wouldn't necessarily identify them just like if you were inside of one. And I just felt strongly that we should do the opposite. And one of the things that we did in the beginning, which was kind of random, is we started naming our projects after women. Colin had a previous home building company that was in honor of his son's names, and he has 3 daughters. So the first 3 infill projects were Ruby, Rose, and Ruth. And sorry, Ruth. I don't know why I blanked on your name.
But there's a lot of pressure being in the studio. So
well, it's my first podcast. Yeah. But long story short, I was like, man, like, let's just go with that, right? Like, there's not a lot of female developers, and I thought we could create a story behind it that would get us a little momentum. But more than anything else, when you create a project, and I did this in my home building days, you're really trying to not just create a building, but make something that has an identity to it and something that somebody can connect with. And what we know is that people connect with people, right? And so in my mind, if we think of our project and then now we can put a name to it and it's a female, then we can think like, well, who is this person? And like, what do they look like? And what do they like to do? And where do they like to hang out? And what do they want their space to look like? And so when you start thinking in that way, then the project has a personality. And so I think why it seemed like such a splash is because all the projects came on. They had kind of a unified theme of being modern and
but they weren't too modern. Like they almost looked timeless. Like it's a modern timeless design.
I think the word modern means a lot of things to different people, right? Like my mom, like 20 years ago, maybe 30, was like, Darlene, I got a modern border. And it's like country blue checks.
Yeah.
And a border is not modern.
Yeah.
Bathroom.
Yeah.
But right. So it doesn't mean like acrylic or slick. It just means fresh, current, new. And I think that's what we were going for. But I just think because of our ability to tie our projects together, and then when we went to market them, tie our story together and do it in a really clear and cohesive way, it just created a lot of buzz and energy because of the volume. But that wouldn't have been the case if we would have marketed them separately, because no one would have really known that they were all together. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So was it kind of walk me through the timeline? So I remember the Ruby was the very first one.
Yep.
When did you acquire the other two projects?
They
real
were
first?
already under contract and underway.
Oh, okay.
And so, I mean, we had, I think, and honestly, Colin and some of the other previous people at CW Group had like, I would guess like 4 to 6 projects under contract. I started with him in 2016, June of 2016 as a consultant, became full-time that fall. And we already had the Ruby, the Ruth, the Edith, the Cynthia, the Rose. We had all of those under contract. So they hadn't all closed, but they were somewhere in the process. So those were like, I want to say the founding 5 projects.
What were you doing in the consulting for him?
Well, that's actually interesting. So, Colin and I had worked together previously, when he was one of the partners at Henry Walker Homes. So we started together in 2010, and I was on the sales and marketing side, and he sold that company and I stayed on the executive team. Blah, blah, blah. He parted ways with his old partners and started his own thing. And I knew from working with him previously that whatever he was going to do was going to be lights out and just have this crazy growth trajectory. And just personally, I liked working with him because of the way he thought and moved through the universe. But we really started in home building together. So when he broke off from his old partners, he, which was Henry Walker Homes, he ended up with Southern Utah, the home builder. And there was a young division president, really smart, sharp guy named Dave Nielsen, who was running the division down there. And his expertise was land acquisition and entitlement. But he hadn't necessarily cranked the wheel on operations as much or had sales or marketing experience. And those are the things that I was really good at. So when I found out Colin was on his own, I just thought one of my key things is if you want to get mentorship from somebody or opportunity from somebody, then it's your responsibility to bring them a ton of value. So I just went to him and said, hey, man, like, I'd love to be a part of your universe or whatever you're doing, and how can I help you? And he was like, I think I could actually use your help in Southern Utah on the home building side and sales and marketing and operations. And I was like, 100%, I'll do it. Like, that's my wheelhouse. So for about 4 to 5 months, I was a consultant for the home builder, Cole West. And honestly, I went down there every week to Southern Utah and just kind of help put some processes in place and best practices. And they had some communities that were launching. And there was this one community in particular called Town Center in Coral Canyon that had been for sale for like 10 months and just like nothing was happening. And, I had been in home building for like 13 years prior, and that was my wheelhouse. So I just said, okay, let me work with Dave, who was such a stud to work with and totally open to all my suggestions. And we put together, just some of the plans that I had done prior in home building to like launch a community and get it off the ground and, what that looks like in the pre-sales. And we did all of those things, engaged the realtor community, had a VIP list, and really, really focused it on the marketing of it and kind of rebuilt how they were doing those things. When we launched that community with the grand opening, redoing a model home, getting that right, I think we sold 18 homes that weekend.
Damn.
And so I think Colin and Dave were like, like we know, like Colin and I had worked together, but like, I just kept continuing to try and get better. And I think he just recognized that like, I wasn't just good at sales and I wasn't just good at marketing, but I'd really wrapped my head around what a home building operation looked like. So we just kept working together on the home building side. And in the background, he just kept, putting more deals under contract up north. And then candidly, they had a really talented team up north, but small. And there was just nobody who had any real operation experience. There was a finance guy, there was a land guy, there was Colin, but just nobody who was like, an operator, I guess. And so I went to him again, trying to bring him value. And I was like, bro, like, you're getting all this stuff under contract. Who's going to run this? And honestly, I gave him a bunch of names and said, you should hire one of these people. And then a couple months later, he came to me and he's like, hey, come work with me full time. And I want you to run the Northern Utah operation. So long story short.
So I want to go back. I feel like a lot of my realtor friends, they have the idea of, being a realtor specifically for home builders. And most of the time I feel like the home building communities, they have like their in-house agents. But what do the good home builders do, like CW, that maybe the bad home builders or the less sophisticated home builders, where do they miss on? Is it just the entire community aspect? Is it the sales, the marketing, the operations? Like, what are some things, if I was a realtor wanting to market to home builders, like, give me all of your communities, how would you go about that? Is it even possible?
Maybe not. I mean, that's the truth. Like, the thing that I know about any good business is that, if you can control a situation and really get your hands in it, nobody cares as much as the people who work there, right? So just, most of the home builders, the reason why they want to keep things in-house is, I think it's just ownership and focus and just that level of like, nobody cares as much as you, right? Mm-hmm. And so I get it, right? Like, resale agents are like, hey man, like, I want to go get a bunch of home builder business because they just see it as a bunch of listings.
Yeah.
But that's just one of the things they want to do, right? Like, they probably are like, I want to do that and then get more home builders and then do resell and like 16 other things.
Yep.
But like, that's not actually what's best for the home builder. What's best for the home builder is to get somebody who's like, guess what? I'm waking up in the morning and it's my responsibility to make sure this community's successful. And that's how I feed my family. That's how the company's successful. That's how I'm successful. And it's my one thing, right? And so I have just always found more success in having an in-house brokerage in home building because you really hold those people accountable to that being their one thing instead of just one of their things. Now, I think that if you're in resale and you identify that you like to be part of home building, what I would do is I'd go find a smaller home builder who maybe can't afford to have an in-house sales team, because the catch is on that is the company pays for all the marketing,
yep,
all of it, right? You may get a lower commission, but they pay for all the marketing. But if it were me and I wanted to have a piece of that pie, I would find a smaller home builder and say, hey, I'm going to do that for you, but just outsource it. But I'll find a team for you. I'll give you marketing. I'll put people on the staff that are dedicated to only your projects. And that's what's going to make them successful, and basically create that in-house brokerage out of house for them in exchange for commissions.
I love it.
I don't know.
No, I think that's great. So you started doing all of these infill. They were almost exclusively townhome projects, if I remember, for the first couple. And you were kind of going into areas that, if you would have told me in 2012 you were in the ballpark, in Granary, and Central Ninth area, I would have been a little scared for you. So what gave you the conviction to go into those areas before it was cool?
Well, I think one of the things that we have to do sometimes as developers is really just be a student of the market and take ourselves out of the picture, right? I mean, I'm a 42-year-old mom who, yes, I own real estate downtown, but I live in a suburb of South Davis County, right? And so the first time I rolled up to the Ruby, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is sketching me out.
Yeah.
You know, it's next to a 7-Eleven. People are doing some real sketchy things outside. And it's like, your instinct is like, well, who would want to live here? Maybe I wouldn't. But the truth is, like, it's not about you, you know? And if you make your projects about you every time, you're going to fail. Your job is to figure out, what does the market want, right? What we know is that people in bigger cities, which Salt Lake City is, you know, the most urban area that Utah has to offer, people are always drawn to live in an urban environment. Like, everybody knows that, right? And the other thing we knew is that Salt Lake City had almost no for sale housing, right? So, you know, there's something that has a really high demand and a really low supply. So that's going to lead you to believe that, like, there's a really good opportunity for somebody to go fill a void in the market, right? And I think you just kind of have to take that leap and, you know, say, hey, this is what cities look like. Salt Lake City isn't offering this, and this is something that we can provide, and just not make it about, well, would I want to live there? Right?
Yeah. I always laugh when other developers say, like, you want to design a place that you would want to live in. It's like, I wouldn't want to live in a micro apartment, but someone else might, you
Exactly.
know?
It's not about you.
It's not about me. So, so who is kind of your target demographic in those areas? Are you marketing specifically to like a 28-year-old female who works at Goldman Sachs, or how do you think about who you should market to and who you should design that community for?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good question, because I think that we have learned the answers over time. And because we have so many reps in Salt Lake City and projects, we've really understood what that looks like. You know, I think at first it was like, oh, it's going to be, working professionals downtown, right? And for sure we market to that. And so, maybe we thought, okay, our vibe, our aesthetic, our marketing is kind of going after a certain demographic. But I think that what we found along the way is it's not really about a specific age group or gender or lifestyle. It's about somebody who wants an urban lifestyle. And that has actually been a much bigger demographic than I ever anticipated. One of the things that we've really learned is that active adults love to have urban properties. They have had a yard before. They've lived in a suburban area. And honestly, and I get it, right? Because I'm 42 and I'm getting closer there than the time being in a suburban environment. But it's like, you just want some energy back in your life in a different way. And so truly, I mean, we have people from 25 to 65, all different types of families who are purchasing our units. I will also say, I think we try and be an aspirational brand in terms of like the aesthetic and look that we're going for. And, real estate, just candidly, everybody knows, hasn't been overly or affordable at all in the last 5 years. So, a 25-year-old, they're probably not going to be able to afford something that we've sold in the last couple years, depending on where they're at in their work. But what I like the idea is that they can like what the vibe is, and maybe on their second move or first move up, if they follow us, then they can get there. And now that we're doing apartments, it's like somebody could start renting one of our units and like our vibe, and then make more money, collect some more cash. If they choose to move towards home ownership, they can do that, but it does feel like a brand that somebody can move through a bunch of different lifestyles with our company.
Where did you learn all the info about branding? Is it just something that's a little bit more intuitive to you, or was there book that you read, someone that taught you all of this? Because, I mean, I love that thesis, like the living somewhere, renting, but having the aspirations to own and buying from the same company.
I started out in this business 20 years ago as a salesperson in a model home at a home builder. And I did that for 5 years. And the cool thing about that job is your job is to listen to people and connect them with what they want. And you really become a student of the market. And what is marketing, right? It's telling a story to convey what you really have to offer. And so I think I learned it by being on the ground floor on sales. Then I moved into the operations side of the business and sales and marketing. And so I just, worked in that space for, 7 years before I moved to total operations. But I also think it is something that I'm naturally drawn towards. It's interesting to me. I think I'm good at it. I think the way my brain thinks. So yeah, I have always had a pretty heavy hand in what the vision of our marketing is. We have the most talented VP of marketing ever.
She is the best.
Abby Wardle. So it's not to take anything away from her, but I would think we agree we're a really good team in terms of like ideation and just doing something really cool.
Yeah, I wear like 90% of my wardrobe is just like CW Urban or CW Group.
Well, that's all Abby.
So, yeah. So you're doing all these projects. This is a very capital intensive business. And the thing that I've always appreciated about you is you're not posting rocket ship emojis on LinkedIn and Twitter. Like, you'll tell me the struggles and like how the last 18 months have sucked.
Yeah.
But how did you get started with such a capital intensive business? Like, you're doing all these projects, you're hiring all this big staff. Can you talk about kind of the early days and some of the struggles you faced?
So hard. It was so hard. I'm not sure. It was so hard in the beginning, and you just have to make choices, right? You have to make choices when dollars come in the door, how they're going to work for you when they go out the door. I think one of the things that we were doing is we have a couple different business lines. So we still had the home builder in St. George, which is bringing in some good money. We're a land development company, so we have always been able to, take raw ground, entitle it, sell it. You can get some quick pops there. The great thing about infill communities is, we're big executors. We're big on urgency. So we're trying to, get in and get out really quick. We're trying to, some of the things with those land buys is some of them were under contract. I want to say the Rose, the one that had the 2 bungalows and the 4 townhomes on 5th and 5th.
I love that project, by the way. That was one of my favorites.
It's awesome to look at, but
maybe not the best memories.
Yeah, it was a tough one. But I think that project was under contract for 18 months, right? So you're working with the land seller, and literally we would try and close on the land when we had a permit ready set. And so we're just trying to shorten our time from the time that we're actually closing and closing on the land and then delivering that to a homeowner. No doubt about it, the cash in the beginning that it takes to get a project off the ground, it's just a lot. And we were looking at that, and we still do once a week look at cash flow, and we look at every single dollar that's coming in our building and every single dollar that needs to go out, and just really making decisions and prioritizing what's the very most important.
So how do you capitalize those projects? Like, if we'll say, it's 2018 and I brought you a townhome site, like, how do you start to think about that?
Well, it just depends. I think that one of the things that we've done is we've got great relationships with some capital partners. So, if it's a small deal and which to us now, like that's gonna
A small deal to me is different than a
yeah,
small deal to you.
exactly. So, depending on how much cash it needs, if it's a couple $1,000,000, we'll do it on our balance sheet. And, we may go to a private debt provider like Taylor Dare Capital. I mean, Rocky and Nick and the whole team over there have been big supporters of us, where you're going to get a little bit more leverage. The other thing that we do is we do almost everything on the project. So we're the developer, we're the architect, we're the GC. A big reason why we do that is because we defer a lot of our fees. So it's like, yeah, maybe we're going to have to carry the overhead of an architect, but then when we capitalize the deal, we can defer that architecture fee. So that, again, that's less cash out the door when you go to capitalize the project. So small deals like that, trying to save dollars, a little bit higher leverage, defer fees. And then on the flip side, bigger deals, we've always just worked with institutional capital partners. So I think that, 5 years ago, there's, 3 to 4 big developers in Utah, and we all know them, have the highest level of respect for them. And from my knowledge, they really didn't borrow any institutional money. They kind of just did deals on their own balance sheet, or they couple up together, or friends and family, but they were just using all of their own dollars. Then, there's another group of people who are doing all the friends and family. Colin's big thing is like, we're not walking through the grocery store on the weekends and someone's going to ask us how our townhome project is. And probably one of the very best things about him is he comes always with an abundance mindset, and like there's room for everybody at the table. And so if you think that way, you're going to be more apt to do institutional money, because you get a portion of it, but they get a portion of it. And the better you do, the bigger portion you get. But, some people, it's like, they just don't want to do that. They don't want to have a waterfall. They don't want to give so much up to, an LP partner. And for us, it's like, that's just the way we do it. And a couple of really good things have come from that. One is it allows us to do more projects, right? Because when we're bringing in that institutional equity partner, and that that deal is like an 80-20 split or something like that, then instead of doing one deal, we can do 5 deals because we've got them along the way. So we try and do programmatic relationships with institutional partners. The other thing that it forces you to do is you just have to be really a good operator. You can't just not have good legal documents. You have to close your books once a month. You have to report out on the budget and the schedule, and you really are held accountable through the process. And that has just brought a higher level of discipline to our company. And so not only are we kind of working on time frames, because that's how we get our money and our promotes, but we're doing it in a really disciplined way. And so really that strategy to work with institutional equity is one of the, I think, core reasons why we operate so good, is because it just became habitual and part of the culture of our company, because it's what our partners require.
How did you get those initial introductions or relationships with those institutional capital partners? Because I think a lot of people, they just imagine some guy in a suit in New York, but really it's just a person with a relationship. How'd you get those?
Yeah, I mean, well, the truth is, there's real estate funds everywhere. Most of our partners are, one of our great partners, Argosy Capital Partners, is based out of Denver. We work with a lot of people in California. And, they're just real estate funds that they're wanting to deploy capital. And everybody was looking at Salt Lake City, 5 to 10 years ago and saying, hey, I want to be a part of this market. But like I mentioned before, a lot of the developers were local, and they just didn't want or need that money coming in. So there was kind of a pretty insatiable appetite for capital that wanted to come to Utah. I think what there was actually not a lot of is shops that were sophisticated enough to have a balance sheet that they would qualify for institutional capital, be able to operate in the way that those partners require, and have enough pipeline that you can come up with a programmatic relationship. Because these guys, they don't want to just place $5 or $10 million. They want to work with someone who, hey, how can we lay out 50 or $100 million over a course of time, and we create efficiencies together. And really there's equity brokers out there that can introduce you, and going to great conferences is where you can connect with people. IMN's got some great conferences that you can connect with these types of partners, but you do have to be able to qualify to receive the type of funds that they're giving.
And so if I send you a project, are you deciding, hey, I'm going to do institutional for rent project here, or, our for sale project? Do you decide that at the beginning of the project, midway through? When do you decide what you're going to do with something?
Well, yeah, we do a meeting every Monday. It's a meeting that Colin participates in, I participate in, and the head of our development company, CW Urban, the head of our home company, anybody who's on the acquisition side. We call it the hunt because we're hunting for new opportunities, and we bring every deal that has been emailed to us, we drove by, someone said something about in the last week, and we just go down through them. And I think Colin and I both are able to kind of just know what something should be. And we kind of just say, hey, is this something we want to look at, right? This project came in, we look at it based on area, location, obviously location, size, price, and then kind of just what's our gut feel, what's it actually approved for? What do we think we could change it to? But usually we kind of have a gut feel for what the product type would be. For sale for rent usually comes pretty early on in the process. But, there have been a couple of things that have happened over the course of the last 6 years where we were going down one track. Like a perfect example is we were building 2 condo buildings downtown.
I was so excited for this. Like,
I was too.
COVID broke my heart. That might be the number one thing that upset me about COVID was those 2 projects becoming apartments instead of condos.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about why that happened, because it broke my heart.
Well, we had 2 projects that we were building downtown, and they were going to be condo buildings. And the truth is, it's really difficult to get capital for sale condos. A lot of liability, a lot of risk. And so, the type of debt on it is more expensive. And during that time, the opportunity zones came out, and that there's some tax advantages for people who buy an opportunity zone project prior to the certificate of occupancy being issued. And so we got some offers for people to come buy our projects in entirety before it was actually finished. And the price per door was higher on the for rent side as it would have been on for sale. And we were able to exit those projects 1 to 2 years early because, just the amount of time it would take to sell 120 units in a project just takes a lot longer. And then you're just being eaten up by that debt service on the back end side. And just even to get a condo loan is difficult. Like you have to have 50% of a building even sold before you can even close on one unit. So those were ones that kind of in the middle of something we pivoted. But really we were always looking to the economics. We love our community. We love building communities, and we're also not doing it for practice. And so, for us to keep, 130 people employed and hundreds of trade partners, we have to do what's most profitable for the project.
And are your institutional capital partners, are they asking you, hey, we want to build this and sell it immediately, or we want to build it and sell it in 5 years? What's driving those decisions? And ultimately, how do you look at exiting those?
Yeah, so usually that strategy is determined up front. So, when you have an equity partner that's putting in 80% of the equity, really they're driving the strategy on whether it's a merchant build, which is something that you're going to build and cap and sell, or whether you're going to hold it. And so it's pretty rare that something would change once you have an institutional capital partner along. Um, but in this sense of like the one that was the condo project, that was going to be a merchant build. So it was going to be an IRR play, quick exit. So selling it just in a bulk deal sooner was really the same strategy. It just
Was accelerated.
Where somebody who's like, hey, I'm doing this for long term, whether it's an opportunity zone project or they're just looking for long-term cash flow, it would be very unlikely they would change the strategy after we inked the JV. In fact, a lot of the projects now have a way, they call it a crystallization, where the developer over time could potentially get out, but the equity partner wants to stay in the deal and be able to have it for their long-term portfolio.
I don't know if we're allowed to talk about that, but is that your plan on some of these projects, is crystallizing and getting out and the equity stays in?
Not really. We have a lot of our own dollars in some of these opportunity zone projects. So what we've done is kind of said, okay, if, based on, some of the gains that we've had, we've been able to roll our dollars into the op zone projects. And we say, okay, because like you said, this is a really capital intensive business, we kind of have to have a mix of everything. We got the home building that's creating some ordinary income, but generating some cash. We've got the merchant builds that are going to generate some cash. And then we get gains along the way. And we take those dollars and we put them into opportunity zone projects, or that's what we've done in the last 3 to 5 years. And we plan to stay in those long term. So, we try and get aligned with our partners on the strategy. But it's always nice to have options.
Yeah, of course.
So.
So I want to step back a little bit. So you were doing the home building, kind of the infill townhomes up here, and then you also started doing single family communities. Then you started doing apartments. Now you're doing commercial. How did that kind of come to be? Were you sitting at a table 5 years ago saying,
get a drink?
Yeah, you can get up and grab a drink.
Okay.
Were you sitting at a table, 5 years ago saying, this is what we want CW Urban to look like or CW Group to look like? Or did it just kind of come naturally, organically along the way?
It's so funny to think of all these things because it's just been like the greatest professional journey and so wild. Like anything you build from the ground up is wild. But really it goes back to that Ruby project, right? That Ruby project, I think we had proforma at like, we're going to sell these townhomes that were 1,800 square feet for $350. And I think we, I want to say there was 12 of them and we sold like 11 of them in the first weekend for $425 or $450, which clearly we could have sold them for more if they went that fast. But I mean, part of that was intentional because it was like making that big splash. You don't realize how much the momentum of that project helped us with other things when we were going out for capital or trying to tell our story. But the lesson that we learned from that is we were like, hey, if we can sell 12 of these for $450, what if we could make them $350? How many could we sell, right? So that got us going on the condo projects. Well, so we went from the townhomes to the condos to apartments because the first thing we did is we said, okay, well, let's build these, but do a smaller one, right? And at the time when interest rates were 3% and, rental rates in Salt Lake City were rising, at the time, our rents at the Charlie or the Olive were really going to be competitive, our for sale monthly payments were really going to be competitive with rental rates. So we learned all this by building these multifamily condos. So to change those to then to start doing apartments, I mean, that's really the exact same thing. It's just, the end exit is different, but we learned something along the way. And then because we had a home builder background and because we're really big in master plan communities, either, building and selling them, I want to say in 2021, CW Land Co. We sold enough lots that it would have been 10% of the building permits for home building that year.
Wow.
So, I mean, I don't think people realize how much land we push to other people. Richmond, Lennar, all the big publics and privates have bought land for us in addition to us doing our own thing. So we were doing master plan communities. So then the next evolution was, in the last 3 to 5 years, the build to rent. You keep hearing that term, which is really kind of comical to me because it's like, talk about a marketing branding. I always say it's like when mayonnaise changed to aioli. It's like nothing changed there, just a new name. Build to rent communities are just multifamily projects with a little bit more stickiness and slightly higher amenitized. But we were good at understanding what a master plan community looked like. We were already doing townhomes. We were already doing rentals. So, we've got 4 to 5 build to rent communities that are either finishing in process, under construction. And I think we were one of the very first to do that, but it really was a combination of everything that we already were doing.
You guys beat me on that Redwood project and it broke my heart. I'm still upset about that.
Well, let's talk about it in a year. I am pumped about it. The Quincy 90 units, townhomes for rent. And I think, there's a really compelling story because, rentals are obviously big downtown. But, one of the things that happened in COVID is people valued more space. And there's just not a lot of townhome rentals. So there's not a lot of places that you can get any larger familial housing. So more bedrooms, 2-car garage, more space. So I think these for rent townhome communities that are really close to Salt Lake City or downtown adjacent or close to some of the major roadways. We have 2 of them going up right now. That one and one off of 200 South, one of my probably very favorite projects, The Yard.
That one is awesome. We'll link something to the site planners in the show notes because it's great.
Well, that's one of those, like, we worked on it for 4 years where we've got all of the horizontal improvements in. It'll go vertical in January. And then, you hear all these rumblings about, this new entertainment district. And so, if something does happen, it's right next to where all of that is supposed to be, potentially a new Major League Baseball team or whatnot. The Power District is what they're calling it. Because it's next to Rocky Mountain Power, the old facility. So yeah, it's going to be awesome. Really awesome.
I'll forgive you for beating me on that.
And I'm sorry about that.
It's okay. It led me to industrial where I'm happy. So that's, yeah.
Well, you can come back anytime. There's space for all of us in multifamily.
I appreciate it. So you are the only female CEO of a home building company in the entire state, I believe.
I actually think that Hamlet Homes has multiple owners and one of them is a female.
So the only solo female.
Maybe.
We'll give you that one. Okay.
Sounds good. We should change that.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of women say how much you inspire them because it is a male-dominated field. I read a statistic the other day. I have no idea if it's true, but it sounds right. Out of the 111,000 development companies in the entire country, 110,000 of them are male-owned. And in your slogan, you have inspired by her. So what does it mean to you, and what are you trying to, I guess, get the next generation of women to understand about being in real estate? It was a loaded question, and I apologize.
That's a lot. Well, I guess I would say that real estate development is, if I just take a step back, I don't even think people know what it is, like the general population.
They don't.
I don't think when someone walks into, let's just call it a Lowe's, they think, oh, this used to be dirt and someone developed it. And then they potentially took this and leased it to Lowe's
Yep.
for 10 or 20 or 30 or 50 years. And then they get a check from them every month. Like, I just don't think people understand what commercial real estate development is unless it runs in your family, generally speaking.
Yeah, I've got a slogan that real estate's hard to learn unless you had a PhD, like Papa had a development company. And
Yeah.
so outside of that, it is really hard.
Yeah,
Like me trying to learn, I was lucky I had a lot of smart people tell me how to do it, but
Yes.
it's a very vague industry.
I think people can wrap their head around resell. Like, candidly, if I asked my dad what I did, I don't think he would be able to say it back to me, because like, he understood when we built and sold houses, but once it starts to get into the rentals and retail development, it's just like, if it's not your lane, it's just not your lane. And that's totally fine. But the thing about nepotism is, most of the time it comes from a grandpa, father, uncle, brother, whatever. And the other thing, so there's just not a lot of people who even know about it. So the funnel is already smaller of who's going to participate in it. And then, there is a lot of females who work in real estate, but I think they tend to generally stay on the resale side of things and really in sales and marketing. And I get that too, because that's where I started. And I think it's a lifestyle choice. I had my children while I was selling homes. And when I decided to move to the operations side, just the time requirement and sacrifices outside of the home were so much greater that it just was a choice that my husband and I made together to go down that route. But I'm not sure it makes sense for everybody. And that's okay. But I think what I'm trying to change is that people know that it's possible, right?
Yes.
And so for me, I get asked to speak on a lot of panels because I'm, I guess like the token
Yeah.
female successful developer. And I only do it because I just want people to be exposed to what's possible and exposed to understand what different opportunities look like. And I used to think, I love the MRED program, the Masters of Real Estate Development up at the U. And I like being a part of that and being a part of that community. But the more I think about it, we got to get in the undergrad programs and the finance and the business majors and have people talking to all the students about what this profession even is. I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but when I turned 40 years old, I was just trying to figure out what my next curve was, like what was the next mountain I wanted to climb outside of work. And, I had a scar about not getting a master's. My undergrad is from Utah State in public relations. I started selling homes like straight out of college. I've been doing this almost 20 years and I'm 42. And so when I turned 40, I decided to go back to school and do the MRED program because I wanted to teach up there. And I love Danny Wall and so many people up at the university. And it's just been a great experience to be able to do that program. But that being said, I took a couple elective classes that were part of the MBA, right? So I could sit in an MRED class and there's maybe 50 students and there's, I'm going to say 10 to 12% female, right? Then I'd sit in an MBA class and there's like 30 or 40% female. So there are a ton of smart, educated women in the workforce. So the only conclusion I can come to is they just don't even know about what this profession is. So they're going to, an MBA program or other sides of the business. So I just think awareness is like the number one thing to get into high school and undergrad, that, real estate isn't just selling resale homes. There is a million different kinds of things that you can do in real estate that are awesome. And then one more thing, because I am really passionate about.
I'm also passionate about this.
About women in real estate, which is, I have been so fortunate to be in business with the very best people. Not just my current business partner, Colin, right, but Nate Pugsley was the first person to hire me. He owns Brighton Development. John Stubbs was the division president at Henry Walker. I've worked with so many good guys. And for women to continue to propel, it also takes men believing in women and saying, hey, I'm going to take away my bias of what a female can do and just totally go equal opportunity and say, I want to have more women in my shop because of who they are and what they can do. And I've just been really fortunate to be surrounded by men who, honestly, every single one of the three gentlemen I just mentioned, they saw something in me of what I could do and what I was capable of years before I thought it was possible for myself. And they came to me and said, hey man, I think you can do this. And I will never forget sitting across from Colin and him looking at me and offering me that job and him just saying you are the one, you can do it. And I didn't believe I could. And so it just takes all of us. It takes women and men together, women believing in themselves of what's possible, and then men surrounding these women saying, yes, I'm here in this with you.
So to all the women that are listening to this show, maybe there's 5 or 10 of them, I don't know. How would you get started? If you were to go back 20 years ago and you say, I want to be a developer, how do you even get started?
I mean, one of the things I tell youth all the time is look around you in general, see who's doing something that is interesting to you. Ask yourself, does this bring me energy? But most likely you're going to be able to identify 1, 2, or 3 people who are doing that thing. And then you just got to have them be your mentor. But here's the thing about mentorship where people get confused, right? They think of a mentor and they're like, well, that person's got to give me something. It's actually the opposite. You got to give them something. I mean, one of my number one mentors is Gail Miller. She has no idea who I am, and that's okay. But I watch who she is, and I watch how she moves through the universe. And when she's on a podcast, I listen to it. And when she has a book, I read it. And when she shows up someplace, if I can be there, I want to listen to her. So you can learn things from people and have them mentor you without necessarily being in their circle. And then if you want to try and penetrate that circle or get more involved in their life, then you got to say to yourself, again, what I did with CW, how do I bring you value, right? And then, you're going to learn by osmosis by just being around them and saying, okay, how do I bring you value? And then you're going to just get insights back. But I do think mentorship is big. You're going to learn, I'm a big believer in if you keep focused on something, if you keep knocking on doors, then something's going to come up. And then it's your job when you get an opportunity to kill it, right? And everybody asks me, how do I get more opportunity? And I'm like, kill it in your current role. So it's if you get an opportunity, take it, run with it, maximize it, and it will continue to come.
Speaking of kind of giving other people opportunities like Colin gave to you, one of my favorite parts about having conversations with you is the way that you talk about everyone on your staff and how you build and empower them. Before the show, you mentioned that you might not, you claim that you're not the best real estate person, but you're a really good business person. And I think a lot of that comes from hiring and empowering your staff. So how do you think about, you're doing a project, really it's your and Colin's name on the project. like your reputation is on the line. How do you think about delegating that to someone else?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. I think you asked me something. We went out to dinner about a month ago with some friends, and you know that I put in a lot of hours.
Yeah.
Um, you know, some days are 10 hours, some days are 8, some days are 14. And you said to me, "Well, what do you do all day?" And I was kind of like, "Oh my gosh." Like, I need to think about that, right? Because there's certain things that I do that I'm responsible for. Um, participate in a lot of the raising of the capital, but it made me just go back and check a couple of things.
You're welcome.
So, we have 129 employees and we have 96 active projects.
Oh,
So that's northern and southern
oh,
Utah,
man.
right? 96. So that are somewhere in process, whether we're asset managing them, whether we're building them, whether they're in pre-dev, whether they're under construction. So, and then I think to myself, well, what do I do? What am I responsible for? And it really comes down to two things. I'm good at building people, and the people are good at building the projects. Now, I have enough reps in just real estate development that I have, along with Colin, just a good sense for what a project should be in the end. But, most of my time is focused on the people who are in our building and just trying to support them and serve them and lead them. And I mean, that's just my job. Now, I think what we're good at, or I'm good at, is I'm not set on, like, if there's an opportunity, this isn't an old school corporate company where you go from, architect 1, 2, 3, 4. Like, I want to know who you are. I want to know what makes you tick. I'm going to learn really quick what you're good at. You may not see it in yourself, but I'm going to help you see it. And it's really important when you're building projects to get not only the right people, but them on the right seat in the bus. So we've done a lot of shifting around based on people's, intangible traits of what I think is possible for that person. And I think we found a lot of success there, just finding out what somebody's good at and letting them do that thing, and then getting a ton of reps in it. Colin's an avid reader, and, I love to contain a lot of content on just like how to grow and be better too. And one of the books we always talk about is The Element, which is you're in your element when you are doing what you love and what you're good at. And then we're a big Malcolm Gladwell fan where it's like, then you got to get that 10,000 hours. So we're constantly trying to like get to there with every person, figure out what they're good at, figure out what they love, and then chase that 10,000 hours so they're a pro at it.
Sorry, I'm going to cut this file. I had something highlighted and then I forgot where it was. Let's see.
Is this good?
Oh, this is awesome. I'm having so much fun right now. So we were talking earlier, you started off in home building, then apartments, then townhomes, then apartments, then commercial. What does the future look like for you? Are you going out of state? Are you just doing more projects? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. For sure, we want to stay in Utah. Colin had expanded out of Utah before, and, we're both also really focused and committed on our families. And, it's not our intention to do things that pull us away from that. And, candidly, I think, everybody asks me like how much time he spends in the office, and it's way more than you would think. It's every day. But, he would like to be able to play a different role and more of a mentor role and be in the office less in the next 0 to 5 years. And so, Utah is where we're going to be. We started doing a lot of retail developments this year. We really like retail. We like we want to keep doing more of what we're doing, which we think there's great opportunity there. Home building, I think we've done a lot of multifamily for rent. I think up north, we want to focus even more on building our home builder. I think for sale housing and home ownership is always going to be a core part of the culture of Utah. And I think we can provide some really cool for sale housing in a different way. Want to do more multifamily. I think that one thing we're good about is just recognizing opportunity and recognizing what we could be good at and just taking bite-sized chunks at it. So, this year we're going to do a couple small flex industrial spaces. So we'll see where that goes. But I think there's plenty in our lane of everything that has to do with housing. Love retail, want to grow that business. That's probably our next focus outside of that. And then, just dip our toe in the pond of industrial, not the mega industrial, but I think the flex space is really interesting.
Me too.
The smaller developments, not everybody's doing those. And I think there's a pretty good demand for them.
Darlene, this has been awesome. I've had so much fun.
Thanks, Tanner.
You inspire me. You inspire so many people. We'll have you back on soon.
Well, thanks for being my friend and having me.
Of course. Oh, that was great.
Okay.
Awesome.